Good day everyone. In this video presentation, I will be discussing with you what is globalization, what does it have to do with education, how does globalization affects the world, and everything else that falls under the term globalization. In this video, we will also be understanding globalization even further through its real-life examples. Let's begin. Globalization and education. Globalization means the speed up of movements and exchanges, especially of human beings, goods and services, capital, technologies, or cultural practices all over the planet. One of the effects of globalization is that it promotes and increases interactions between different regions and populations around the world. To put it in simple words, globalization serves as bridge between two countries, allowing trades or even making it faster. Moving on to aspects of globalization. First aspect of globalization, industrial globalization or transnationalization, refers to the rise and expansions of multinational and transnational enterprises. Financial globalization refers to the emergence of worldwide financial markets and better access to external financing for corporate, national, and subnational borrowers. Number 3, political globalization refers to the spread of political sphere of interest to the regions and countries outside the neighborhood of political actors and the potential formation of a global citizen movement. Number 4, information globalization refers to the increase in information flows between geographically remote locations. Number 5, cultural globalization refers to the growth of cross-cultural contacts. Number 6, globalism refers to the universal internationalist impulse that the world is connected. Moving on to core values and competencies for global education. Here are the core values and core skills and competencies brought about by the global education. Peace and non-violence. Globalization brought nations together. An example of this is the United Nations, which is committed to maintain peace and security among 51 countries. Social justice and human rights. Through globalization, slaveries are put to stop. Economic well-being and equity. Globalization helped build better economies by means of worldwide trades. Cultural integrity. Globalization helps preserve native cultures by sharing their knowledge with other countries through education. Ecological balance. Care for the environment is shared across the globe. Democratic participation, which allows us to influence the behavior of those empowered to handle the nation. Core skills and competencies. Self-worth and self-affirmation, affirmation and others, cultural and racial differences, critical thinking, effective communication skills, non-violent conflict resolution and meditation, imagination, and lastly, effective organizing. Moving on to socio-cultural, economic, and political issues brought about by globalization. Number 1, socio-cultural issues. Massive migration are changing the ways we experience national identities and cultural belonging. Because globalization allows this, large numbers of people are migrating from one country to another. Managing differences is becoming one of the greatest challenges to multicultural countries. And because of the large numbers of migration, unique appearances from races mixes with another, just like how the original physical appearance of a Filipino has faded over the years due to migrants that tend to have families in the Philippines. In the present times, it is now hard to tell whether you are Filipino, Spanish, or American. Global changes in culture deeply affect educational policies, practices, and institutions. Because of the transparency of culture across the globe due to globalization, most Filipinos tend to copy or assume the cultures from other countries. Like for example, most female Filipinos post things about normalized wearing bikini outdoors, which is obviously an American culture. Well, unfortunately, that's not how Filipinos originally styled themselves. Economic issues. This speaks about worldwide inequality. Consistency and quality of educational experiences remain patchy. Secondary education in developing countries remains quite weak, and new technologies of globalization arises. Third, political issues. Constraint on national, state policy, economic coordination and exchange, global conflict, crime, terrorism, and environmental issues. Moving on to globalization and its impact on education. Number one is needed reforms within the educational systems. Changes in educational system are called out by the need to have globally competitive students from each country. Such needed reforms within the educational systems are curriculum upgradation. The modern advances in information technology have revolutionized, among others, the content of knowledge and the process of educational transaction. Another is productivity orientation. The basic objective of globalization is to enhance productivity and to make the educational system an instrument in preparing students who can compete in the world market as productive members of the society. Another impact of globalization is the fallout of globalization. Under this are the internalization of education. This has become a worldwide phenomenon because of the entry World Trade Organization and the inclusion of educational services under the General Agreement on Trade and Services, which has given a boost to the internalization of higher education. Finance-related issues. In order to be a part of global configuration, the requirement of funds for social services including education will increase manifold. Privatization of secondary and higher education. As a corollary to the suggestions about reducing public investment in secondary and higher education, a plea has been made to hand over these sectors to private bodies. To summarize the impact of globalization on education, we can say that it will mean a more competitive and deregulated educational system, with more pressure on it to assure that the next generation of workers are prepared for some amorphous job market of the 21st century. This will solve the issue where graduates of the biological sciences are tasked to teach physical science and vice versa by means of upgrading the curriculum and combining all sciences into one course program. Educational system will increasingly provide the sites of struggle over the meaning and power of national identity and a national culture. Moving on to multicultural education. Multicultural education relates to the education and instruction designed for the cultures of several different races in an educational system. This approach to teaching and learning is based upon the consensus of building respect and fostering cultural pluralism within racial societies. Multicultural education is a field of study and an emerging discipline whose major aim is to create equal educational opportunities for students from diverse racial, ethnic, social class, and cultural groups. One of its important goals is to help all students to acquire the knowledge, attitudes, and skills needed to function effectively in a pluralistic democratic society and to interact, negotiate, and communicate with people from diverse groups in order to create a civic and moral community that works for the common good. Moving on to the dimensions of multicultural education. James A. Banks formulated 5 specific dimensions, namely content integration, knowledge construction process, prejudice reduction, equity pedagogy, and empowering school cultures. Content integration deals with the extent to which teachers use examples and content from a variety of cultures in groups to illustrate key concepts, principles, generalizations, and theories in their subject area or discipline. The infusion of ethnic and cultural content into a subject area is logical and not contrived when this dimension is implemented properly. Knowledge construction. The knowledge construction process describes teaching activities that help students to understand, investigate, and determine how the implicit cultural assumptions, frames of references, perspectives, and biases of researchers and textbook writers influence the ways in which knowledge is constructed. Prejudice reduction, hence the name, seeks to help students develop positive and democratic racial attitudes. It also helps the student to understand how ethnic identity is influenced by the context of schooling and the attitudes and beliefs of dominant social groups. An equity pedagogy exists when teachers modify their teaching in ways that will facilitate the academic achievement of students from diverse racial, cultural, socioeconomic, and language groups. This includes using a variety of teaching styles and approaches that are consistent with the range of learning styles within various cultural and ethnic groups, such as being demanding but highly personalized when working with American Indian and Native Alaskan students. It also includes using cooperative learning techniques in math, and science instruction to enhance the academic achievement of students of color. Empowering school culture's dimension involves reconstructing the culture and organizing of the school so that students from diverse racial, ethnic, socioeconomic, and language groups experience equality. Members of the school staff examine and change the culture and social structure of the school, grouping and labeling practices, sports participation, gaps in achievement among groups, different rates of enrollment in gifted and special education programs among groups, and the interaction of the staff and student across ethnic and racial lines are important variables that are examined and reformed. Let us now discuss the goal of multicultural education. The first and most obvious goal is to encourage the values of openness and acceptance towards people belonging to different cultural and ethnic backgrounds. Multicultural education focuses on nurturing admiration and appreciation about diverse ethnocultural heritage in young minds. Children are imbibed with greater knowledge and understanding about how to behave in a more culturally responsible manner. They acquire skills to navigate various cultures. They learn about societal evils like racism and discrimination and how to stave off those. Moving on to 4 levels of multicultural education. First level is the contribution approach. Deals with heroes, holidays, and discrete cultural elements. Teachers conveniently infuse cultural themes like holidays and heroes into the curriculum. Additive approach. It is where teachers add content, concept, themes, and perspective that are multicultural without changing the structure of their instructional materials. Here, teachers worked hard to infuse multicultural themes, content, and perspective into the main curriculum. This usually entails worksheets and reading materials on specific cultural activities related to the main topic being taught. Transformative approach requires students to change the structure of their curriculum to enable students to engage concept, issues, events, and themes from a multicultural perspective. Here, the teacher uses the mainstream subjects like mathematics, the arts and language, and literature to acquaint students with the ways the country's culture and society has emerged from a complex synthesis and interaction of the diverse cultural elements that originated within the various cultural, racial, ethnic, and religious groups that make up the society. Social action approach allows the students to make decisions on important social issues and take actions to help solve them. And finally, the last part of this video presentation, lesson planning for the multicultural classroom. There are 7 steps to which order may vary but the content remains the same, namely goals and objectives, materials and resources, anticipatory set or entry, instructional input, guided practice, independent practice, and assessment or evaluation. Goals and objectives. This is where the teacher articulates her expectations from students based on the K-12 Basic Education Curriculum Guide. And it is also in this part where she articulates any multicultural and behavioral objective that she wants to achieve through the lesson. Materials and resources. This is to include all the materials the teacher will use for the lesson, including the references, printed and non-printed facilities that enhance the presentation of the lesson. Anticipatory set or entry. This step is to excite, arouse interest in, and prepare students for the learning experience. Some activities to use here may include but not limited to reading a relevant story, playing a short game, viewing a film teaser, and using the KLW chart, which asks students what they already know about the subject, what they want to know, and what they have learned. Instructional input. This step is where the teacher presents, explains basic concepts, definition, and clarifications for learners to grasp the lesson. Guided practice. This step is where teacher and the learner go through the process or steps of the required activity. Instructions may be given by the teacher to the whole group or may be distributed it individually. The challenge is to make sure they understand or know what to do. Independent practice. This step is where learners are to do the task by themselves. Creativity and uniqueness are to be encouraged and respected in order to respect diversity. And finally, assessment and or evaluation. This is where comments and suggestions are solicited from viewers and where teachers can give encouragements. Rubrics may be used so that peer evaluation and sharing will take place. That would be all for this video presentation. I hope we all learned a lot today. Thank you.